Welcome to Mindshock. This is the Chris Benoit Conspiracy Series. I am, of course, your host, Bruce McGuire, and we will be taking a look at further oddities, particularly in and around the home, possibly additional witnesses, and information that I haven't seen discussed anywhere else. In typical Mindshock fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. If it's still not working, you can just go to youtube.com/Mindshock. A lot of people don't get notifications for some reason. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. So, the Benoit case is obviously problematic for a lot of different reasons. Some people obviously believe there was more to the case than reported. It might have not been that simple that he just kind of snapped and did this. There might have been way more to the equation, and how much evidence is there of more oddities? So let's take a look at this very interesting Tumblr post. This is expletive loads of wrestling or tumblr.com/expletive loads of wrestling. 10-year, this was, is there a date here for this article? I don't see it. So I'm assuming it was exactly 10-year anniversary here, but let's take a look at it. It was Sunday, June 24th, 2007. I was at a Buffalo Wild Wings with my ex-girlfriend and a friend of mine as would gather monthly to watch the WWE pay-per-view. On this instance, it was Vengeance Night of Champions, an event where CM Punk would be battling Chris Benoit to determine the new CW World Heavyweight Champion, a title that had been vacated by Bobby Lashley. As the event went on, it was announced that John Morrison would be replacing Benoit, with little explanation given as to why Benoit wasn't on the show. The next day, as I was driving home from work, my friend Brandon, who had watched the pay-per-view with the night before, called to tell me the news: Chris Benoit was dead. As I sat at a stoplight only minutes from my house, I remember crying immediately. Benoit wasn't just a favorite wrestler of mine, but an inspiration to work harder, to never give up, to persist in the face of adversity, and to chase every dream you have, regardless of whether or not they're attainable. I remember a video package the WWE had released for Benoit featuring the Finger 11 song One Thing. Wow, Finger 11, are they still around? That was an interesting band. The song still stands as one of my biggest inspirations as I recall how hard Benoit worked in wrestling. What made this death that much more of a shock to me was that only weeks earlier, Benoit had wrestled at an Ohio Valley wrestling event that I was at. He was very personable, smiling at anyone who had approached him and happy to speak with anybody who had questions. I watched Raw that night as Vince McMahon, who only a week earlier had been blown up in a limousine, who could forget that segment, stood solemnly in a ring that stood in an empty arena speaking about Benoit as the episode showcased Benoit's finest moments in the ring. The episode was originally supposed to be a 3-hour memorial tribute to McMahon. Throughout the night, different wrestlers spoke on their fallen friend, some very upset and some downtrodden. but it seemed that some knew the grisly details where others hadn't. Two testimonials that stood out were Chavo Guerrero Jr.'s and a very grim one from William Regal. Regal seemed to lead on that he knew more about the situation, as he neglected to comment on Benoit the man, but rather on Benoit the wrestler. As the week unfolded, details surrounding Benoit's death came to light and showed that Chris, his wife Nancy, formerly known as Woman, in ECW and WCW, and his youngest son Daniel were all found dead in the home that they shared in Atlanta, Georgia. According to the autopsy, Nancy was murdered first, bound at the feet and wrists. She died of asphyxiation Friday, June 22nd, and was found wrapped in a towel with blood under her head and a Bible placed next to her bed. According to the autopsy on Daniel, he had died on Saturday morning as he lay in bed, again with a Bible placed next to him, with Benoit himself dying on Sunday, having used a weight machine to break his own neck as a Bible lay on the weight machine. Although that's the official cause of death listed for each of the involved, there are a lot of details that have been ignored following the incident. For example, several voicemails were left by Benoit to wrestler Chavo Guerrero Jr. and WWE official Brad Armstrong, both of whom stated that Benoit seemed off. Chavo later told that he had spoken to Benoit, who claimed that he had missed his flight and wouldn't be appearing at Vengeance Night of Champions, and was stressed out due to Nancy and Daniel having food poisoning. On Sunday morning between 3:51 and 3:58 a.m., several texts were sent to co-workers and fellow wrestlers from both Chris and Nancy's cell phones, stating that the dogs were in the enclosed pool area and that the garage side door had been left open. A call was also placed to WWE officials by Benoit, who alleged that he was taking his family to the hospital and would be in Houston for the event. According to Nancy's sister Sandra, Benoit's computer history included, quote, the quickest and easiest way to break a neck, end quote. And somebody actually commented that on episode 1 on Mindshock, and I kind of brought up that, again, if somebody was looking to set him up, would they put that on the search history to fool all the gullible people? The coincidence there is to just, they wouldn't be able to fathom that any kind of search history could be planted. Again, I am not alleging that is true or untrue. I don't claim anything is true or untrue. I do not claim anyone is innocent or guilty, and the motto here on Mindshock is, of course, the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. When WWE official John Laurinaitis contacted the Fayette County Sheriff's Department to check on the family, the police notified the WWE around 4:15 p.m. to say that 3 bodies had been found and that the home was ruled a major crime scene. Several motives have been listed for the crime, such as Benoit's mental state being so deteriorated due to years of head trauma that his brain resembled an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. Steroids were also listed as a potential lead for the cause, as roid rage had been prevalent for years among athletes. But as several wrestlers have stated since the incident, quote, how many baseball players have killed their wife and kid? It's also, or even football players, I mean, it's not exactly common even in contact sports. It's also noted that steroid rage usually leads to rage, not deliberation, which leads to the question of why Nancy's arms and legs had been bound. It's been stated by Benoit's peers that he was immensely paranoid, often traveling different routes from the airport to get to his home in order to evade potential followers. Now, I do have a major mind shock coming at the end of this episode. I'm going to read a tip that came in from a Mindshock listener about some kind of alleged inside info, which is very, very mind-shocking to say the least. I don't think it can be written off that easy, so there might be a lot more to all of this. Several wrestlers have claimed that Benoit would have two sides, one that would lash out at you and another that would be your best friend, with the events of the day dictating which one you spoke to. Brad Armstrong, however, stated that Benoit, quote, never said a cross word to anybody, end quote. In 2003, Nancy had filed for divorce citing domestic abuse, but the divorce was dropped and the two continued to be married until their deaths. Hardcore Holly would later state in his autobiography that Benoit would drink heavily when issues with Nancy would arise, which several wrestlers later confirmed. As more details surrounding the Benoit case arose, the WWE issued the following statement on SmackDown. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last night, on Monday Night Raw, the WWE presented a special tribute show recognizing the career of Chris Benoit. However, now some 26 hours later, the facts of this horrific tragedy are now apparent. Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name tonight. On the contrary, tonight's show will be dedicated to everyone who has been affected by this terrible incident. This evening marks the first step of the healing process. Tonight, WWE performers will do what they do better than anyone else in the world, entertain you. Following this, the WWE have done all but eliminate Benoit from their history, often negating that he was part of several high-profile events, such as the Royal Rumble, which Benoit won in 2004, or the main event of WrestleMania 20, where Benoit defeated Triple H to win the World Heavyweight Championship. Truly tragic, as the moment has often been cited as one of the greatest in Mania history. There was a photo of Benoit said to have been taken Saturday morning as Nancy was dead in Benoit's home. One strange part of the Benoit situation is that Nancy's Wikipedia page, which can be edited by anyone, listed Nancy as being dead 14 hours before the bodies were found. And we went over this in episode 1. That's obviously a major issue that a lot of coincidence theorists try to explain away, but I don't know if that could be easily explained away. Someone knew something, because how often are just random pro wrestler pages edited like that to say that people are dead that aren't dead? I mean, certain high-profile celebrities are reported as being deceased, but how many wrestlers? I mean, I don't know. What's the precedent there? How many times has that happened? Particularly several hours before it actually happened. The original edit listed, quote, Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the ECW World Championship match at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. The man who posted this claimed that it was written due to rumors he'd heard on the internet, and it was found that he'd also made several edits to other Wikipedia articles that were unfounded. And wasn't his IP also in Connecticut, where WWE headquarters is? I actually forgot that detail from the previous episode. It was claimed that Benoit was given 10 months to live due to an enlarged heart by Nancy's sister. What's strange about the case is that a large knife was found under Daniel's bed. Prior to her marriage to Benoit in 2000, Nancy was charged with aggravated battery after chasing her former husband, Kevin Sullivan, with a knife in 97. And of course, there's a huge coincidence stack regarding Kevin Sullivan, who even hung Benoit by the ropes in their match. I mean, it was in one of their matches, just really weird stuff with Sullivan. Benoit's friend Dean Malenko stated, quote, "He's not a monster. We're talking about a guy who a month ago was in Jacksonville, and rather than drive down to Orlando, where he needed to be the next day, he took a flight to be home with Daniel," end quote. Another bizarre detail that never seems to get mentioned is that wrestler Dave Taylor was allegedly spotted at the Benoit residence before police arrived. Benoit's neighbor, Holly Schrepfer, was contacted by police to enter the property before they arrived to secure the dogs and check on the family. She discovered the bodies and, whilst fleeing the home, claimed that she saw Dave and his wife carrying a platter of deli food. In no way does this point to Taylor being involved in the deaths, but it's possible that he was coming by to check on his friend. It was suggested that he was sent by the WWE to check out everything and get the facts early to prevent a PR problem. This could also be why William Regal's tribute was so grim, as the two were friends and tag team partners in the WWE. Taylor has since denied that this is possible, as he says he was in Texas on tour with the WWE. There is no evidence for him being in either location other than Schrepfer's claim. So he can't back up his own claim that he was in Texas. So he was on tour in Texas. But what was he doing at that particular minute when Schrepfer alleges that him and his wife, that Dave Taylor and Dave Taylor's wife, were carrying a platter of deli food? It doesn't state here. Are they carrying the platter of deli food into the home or out of the home at that point? It doesn't state here. And so the cops, where exactly were the cops? Did they tell her to go in before they even arrived at the location? It says before police arrived. So if Dave Taylor was there with his wife, were they exiting the house calmly with deli food? Or were they going to enter the home? And by the time police got there, they were gone, so nobody else can corroborate that? I mean, this is post-2000. Do none of these rich people have security cameras at their giant mansions? What's going on with that? Has anybody actually heard of security footage? Warrior Empire stated William Regal was at his house too. At what time? Warrior Empire stated 9 times out of 10 police are paid off. I don't know about that percentage. R1, you have possibly the best podcast I've ever heard. Just wanted to say thanks for that. Yep, thanks, R1. Logic and reason rule the day here. I do not claim anything is true or untrue. We examine every theory, every rabbit hole, and upturn every stone, attempting not to fall for silly logical fallacies like everybody else. William Regal, so Warrior Empire, do you have any information on William Regal being at the home? You mean previously or that day? Heard that from other YouTubers. Previously or that particular day? The same day as the neighbor? Yeah, it's kind of weird that Dave Taylor and his wife ever interviewed? Was Dave Taylor's wife ever interviewed? Because it would be really creepy if they were calmly walking out of the Benoit home, which had three bodies. Because it doesn't state here whether they were calm or not, or whether they were going towards the house or away from the home. Because she discovered the body, and so she's running out of the home in horror, allegedly. She claimed that she saw Dave and his wife carrying a platter of deli food. That's all it says. It doesn't say in or out. I mean, and presumably, if they're good friends, the neighbor would know exactly what Dave Taylor looked like, who Dave Taylor was. I mean, why would she randomly confuse people for Dave Taylor and his wife? Doesn't really make sense. Warrior Empire. And I find it odd that Paul Heyman and other people are quick to say that SOB Chris did it and they was quick to erase him. Yeah, that's really bizarre. I mean, obviously there would have had to have been a full investigation. So that's definitely odd. Whether he did it or not, that's odd, no question. I think it's also fairly obvious that the WWE knew a whole lot more about the situation, regardless of what actually happened. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely so many issues with this one, and it doesn't really get discussed as much anymore for some reason. But let's continue here. So Taylor denied that he was at Benoit's home, but he couldn't provide evidence that he was at the WWE tour in Texas. That's what it says here. I don't know if he has since then. But continuing the post here, Benoit kept a personal journal following the death of longtime best friend Eddie Guerrero. In it, he would write letters to Eddie, which makes me wonder why he never wrote a suicide note or farewell. Well, if he completely snapped, maybe he wouldn't have, but that doesn't explain all the Bibles. And also, based on the logistics of the weight machine, I mean, I'm assuming the Bible was put either on the seat. I mean, where exactly was it put? And could it have been put there prior to snapping one's own neck with the machine, if it's even possible to do so, which is highly disputed? In the personal effects returned to Benoit's father, a handwritten note was found in a Bible that said, quote, "I am preparing to leave this earth," end quote. And was there handwriting analysis on that particular note? Or was that note written a year or 2 or 3 years prior? Within a few months of each other, Guerrero, Johnny Grunge, and Victor Black Cat Marr all died, respectively consisting of Benoit's best friend, his local buddy who he went to after problems with Nancy, and his riding partner on Japanese tour. Wasn't there another? I thought there was another pro wrestler friend of his that he had worked with prior who also died either the day before or the day after. I forgot his name. Chris's diary remains weren't found by police, but rather by neighbor Holly Schrepfer in a garbage can. So that's kind of weird. If you're going to off yourself, are you going to throw your own diary in the garbage can? Or if there's other people involved and they did the murders and they're walking out of the house reading the diary for kicks, would they bring it with them or would they toss it in the trash on their way out? Again, I am not claiming to know, but that is curious. How many people that have committed suicide or even murder suicides threw their own diaries in the garbage? That'd be a curious stat to know. Also, Holly Schrepfer, apparently she said she found it in the garbage can, so is that true that it even was in the garbage can? I don't know. There are a lot of facts that don't make sense with what has been alleged to have happened. Toxicology reports claim that all three involved in the incident, Chris, Nancy, and Daniel, were sedated heavily. There are claims that beer cans were found near Benoit's body, but there was no alcohol found in his system. And again, I'm not sure if there was corroboration on whether the cans were even tested for DNA. There were texts sent from Benoit's home that were sent after Benoit's time of death as determined by police. There are several wrestling fans who have turned on Benoit and refused to give credit to his hard work in the sport. That is their prerogative. I personally love Benoit as a wrestler and will never shun the fact that he gave a lot to wrestling, but I also don't have children and have never been married. I don't know how I'd feel from that perspective. Well, I mean, what does that have to do with anything else? Because he's either innocent or he's guilty. That being said, after watching several videos and reading endless articles and write-ups regarding the case, I do think that everything is worth a second look, as I don't think it happened quite like we all have been told that it did. Nevertheless, two great figures of wrestling history died 10 years ago, and the wrestling world was changed forever as a result. Rest in peace, Chris, Nancy, Daniel. So this was from the Expletive Loads of Wrestling Tumblr blog. Yes, Warrior Empire Owen Hart also died in the ring in the 90s. William was by the house, I think, a few days before. Yeah, I think I went over that on episode 1. I don't think it was the day of. Yeah, his theme song's pretty awesome. Regardless of what happened. Okay, let's go to further curiosities because there's a lot of unanswered questions about this neighbor. So, user since deleted on WrestlingFigs.com posted this July 24th, 2012. It has come to my attention the woman Holly Schrepfer that found the bodies of Benoit and his family has a criminal record. Don't believe me? Check out this article in The Citizen. This article is from January 5th, 2010. A Central Fayette County man and woman were charged, and more than 24 underage drinkers were cited by Fayette County Sheriff's deputies New Year's Eve at the couple's residence on Green Meadow Lane near Quarters Road. That's a semi-rural area between Redwine and Ebenezer Roads in the south central part of the county. Terry Schrepfer, 52, and Holly Schrepfer, 50, were both charged with keeping a disorderly house and contributing to the delinquency of a minor, according to Sheriff spokesperson Brent Rowan. Rowan said deputies were called to the residence by a neighbor who called 911 about a loud party. Officers arrived to find a large number of underage drinkers on the premises. He said deputies took 20 underage drinkers aged 17 to 20 to jail on charges of possession of alcohol by a minor. Rowan said, adding that 2 of those were also charged with obstruction for running from police. Also cited for possession of alcohol by a minor were 7 teenagers under the age of 17 who were placed in the custody of their parents, Rowan said. It may also be important to note that Holly Schrepfer has 2 names she goes by. The other name, Holly McFaig. This makes researching the woman extremely difficult. The real question is, can this woman be trusted? Well, I don't know if necessarily anybody should be trusted. We got to follow the evidence objectively. But that is a curiosity if she's got some kind of double identity. Now, is that simply her maiden name? I don't know. There really isn't a ton of information, though. Apparently, she left the area, at least temporarily, immediately after this. I don't know what that means. Apparently, the police were terrified of Benoit's dogs, so they asked the neighbor to go in. But what was weird is, apparently, this was all before they ever even arrived there. So they're just calling up random private citizens to do their work for them. Does anybody find that weird? I don't know. That's kind of weird, isn't it? Like the police are just calling up random private citizens to do their job. It's also kind of weird. Like even ESPN.com is reporting that. So WWE were the ones reporting that Daniel had some kind of medical problems. Whereas the neighbor or the prosecutor disputed this. So July 3rd, 2007, ESPN.com. Prosecutor disputes the WWE's assertion that Son had mental retardation or Fragile X syndrome. So why was the WWE pushing that his son had this issue? I mean, I don't know. Were they trying to say, so a spokesperson for WWE, which shortly after the killings deflected speculation about steroids by saying the Benoits had argued over whether the wrestler should stay home more to take care of the 7-year-old son, also backed away Tuesday from its statements about the boy's diagnosis. So WWE were trying to say that he had this condition and that the Benoits were like they wanted, where Chris wanted to stay home more. Is that what the WWE were pushing? Because WWE attorney Jerry McDevitt was the one that was saying Daniel had Fragile X syndrome. That's kind of weird. The other thing that's interesting is that at the same time, WWE issued a news release saying steroids, quote, were not and could not be related to the cause of death, end quote. So is this all before autopsies, before investigations? WWE is already issuing news releases saying that steroids were not and could not be related. That's kind of weird. Like, how would they know either way? I mean, if there's no investigation, it's kind of weird. But they were definitely trying to spin some damage control. Yeah, it actually is kind of hard to find information about Holly McFaig, or yeah, it's weird. She's listed as McFaig in some sources, Schrepfer in others. I mean, yeah, that is pretty weird. There's another interesting article here on WrestleZone.com, July 24th, 2007. Police unable to find diary. WWE star Dave Taylor called Benoit's neighbor Holly McFaig at one point prior to WWE's Rich Herring calling the local police on June 25th. Apparently, Taylor had known McFaig in some form. So this is officially reported that Taylor called McFaig, called Holly the neighbor. And Holly reported that he was physically there with his wife. I mean, that actually leads more credence to the neighbor's story that he was there, unless she's trying to blame him. But apparently it's on record that Dave Taylor called Holly. Wow. Police did find Nancy's purse, evidence of the insurance policy Benoit had taken out in Edmonton for his children, David and Megan, and Benoit's ex-wife, Martina. Police were unable to find Benoit's diary. As noted before, Benoit wrote letters to his pal Eddie in his diary to help him cope with his friend's passing. Police have also been unable to find pictures, photos that Nancy's best friends were aware of. Nancy kept of herself showing evidence of being beaten. Photos were found of Nancy that showed she had been beaten earlier in her life. So supposedly, Nancy's friends said that there were recent photos showing bruises or whatever, and the police couldn't find them. And apparently, the police couldn't find the diary either, although Holly said she found it in the trash. So, at which point did she find it? After all the law enforcement searches failed to find it? Did they even try to find it? Did they look through the garbage and then she did when they didn't? I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions here. Candy Kane posted, something that's not been talked about is she stabbed her second husband here in Daytona Beach. Are you talking about Nancy? I mentioned that earlier, that there was a charge. It stated that she went after him with a knife. I don't know the extent of that, but yeah. But apparently, again, according to WrestleZone.com and the Wrestling Observer, it was reported on record that Dave Taylor called Holly prior to Rich Herring on behalf of the WWE calling the local police on June 25th. What does all that mean? And why did she say he was there if he wasn't there? With his wife and some deli food. Were they coming to check on Benoit? But then why would he have denied doing that? On the Squared Circle subreddit, Suplex Through Glass posted this 7 years ago. Benoit Conspiracy has been watching a lot of shoot interviews and stumbled upon one about Chris Benoit after he died. Various wrestlers like the Blue Meanie, Sonny, and Kevin Nash talked, and some brought up the rumors of it being a professional hit. Obviously, Chavos said that on Jericho's show as well, or certain things that could be interpreted as such. I think I actually read this on episode 1. Alan Joestar posted, have you heard about the guy who wrote the song Chris Benoit for the ICP? That guy talks about how him and Benoit were involved in an Illuminati-type cult that revolves around cloning. It includes expletive like this group cloning children and famous people for sexual or murder pleasures. At some point, the guy claims Chris Benoit's clones were the Queen of England's favorite sex toy. Now, that might be wild and out there, but in the post-Epstein era, if cloning technology is real, like in another 10, 20, 50 years, not in relation to this case, but if things like that are being done, would people actually be surprised by this in a few more decades? Apparently, Brian Ladd, the dream psychic, did a drawing claiming a knife was used in the murder, implied Sullivan was involved. And apparently there doesn't seem to be verification of any DNA testing done at all at the scene regarding anybody. Because if there were other people in the home, they could find that out. Presumably, if they actually did some testing, or were they not interested in finding out what really happened. And if so, why? Because obviously a lot of people think this is all connected to the higher ups at the WWE, possibly Vince McMahon. And obviously his image quite tarnished recently. Paid. Yeah, paid by whom and why? Bad Ass Suchi posted this comment on the Mindshock Benoit episode. Benoit's doctor probably killed him and his family. Somehow, that other guy who he stole Nancy from were probably in cahoots with this doctor. WWE did everything, especially to not look further into this case, but just fudge up the company by making it PG. F. Linda McMahon. Interesting comment there. So this guy thinks that Benoit's doctor was in cahoots with Kevin Sullivan. DeMar Thomas posted, someone that moved the dogs was probably someone the dogs recognized, and they entered the home and took everyone out, moved the bodies, and put the Bibles next to them and changed the crime scene to make it look like he did it, and also had keys to the home. The neighbor, Holly, was the only outsider that were friends with Chris and Nancy to have keys to the gate and home. I heard she said that she told police she saw 3 people coming with food towards the Benoit home and were seen leaving in dark clothing. The police said they don't have any record of that and said she never said that. That's interesting. What does everybody make of that? Mike Matthews, very interesting comment here. Ray Rawls texted Benoit that he was coming on the weekend with a friend who wanted to meet Benoit. The guy who posted the Wikipedia is a 1-minute drive from WWE headquarters. Benoit's neighbor has ties to Sullivan and Freemasonry. Beer cans were not tested. Yeah, so I haven't seen conclusive evidence that there's anything that ties Holly to Sullivan. Oh, Beef Wellington. That was supposedly the guy who died the same weekend as Benoit. What does everybody make of that? June 24th, 2007. Biff Wellington. Supposedly, this guy had suffered multiple strokes and was battling drug addiction. Bauer's parents, so his real name was Shane Alexander Bauer. Bauer's parents found his body in bed at his home June 24th, 2007. They were concerned because they had not heard from him for 4 days. Medical officials examining the body believe he had been dead for a few days due to a heart attack. Coincidentally, his body was found on the same day as his former tag partner, Chris Benoit. So they were found on the same day, but supposedly he had been dead for several days. Yeah, that's quite a lot of people in the same circle who are dying in a short period of time. Then Pat posted, tying up loose ends. What would they all know, though? Because there's plenty of other people who knew Benoit who weren't killed. Candy stated, McMahon always creeped me out. Yeah, me too. Like, I'd watched pro wrestling since late 80s, early 90s. And yeah, there was always something off about that guy. He just doesn't look right in the head. There's definitely something off about him. I don't know what it is. I'm not claiming to know. But yeah, Vince would not be, when people ask me to name a normal person, Vince McMahon is not the first person who comes to mind. Candy posted, I believe no one wants to believe that Chris was capable of this. Well, that might be true, but again, if we're just looking at the evidence, it doesn't quite add up, regardless of who it is. I mean, pro wrestler XYZ, we're just looking at the situation objectively, because there's all these problems here with the investigation, with the neighbor, with all these other individuals. Vince reminds me of Trump. I don't get the same weird satanic stare vibes from Trump as Vince, but who knows? Yeah, I remember that Warrior Empire. Yeah, Trump had some pro wrestling appearances. Pretty funny. I wonder if Trump was ever interviewed specifically about Benoit or Vince. He doesn't seem to have a filter, so maybe he might say something. Jamel promo was Whack McGee posted. But I've said that to myself when the story first came out back in 2007. I don't think Chris Benoit did that. No man is going to work so hard and does a headbutt dive and made so much money and then kills his family and himself and plus cremate him. I don't care if a man has an argument with his wife. He's not going to keep going to work and working hard to make money and then waste it all. It's just, I don't care if a man has an argument with his wife. It just doesn't sound right to me. We got little children, the bumps they had all the time, and they don't grow up to do crazy things. I think the doctors are lying. I believe Chris Benoit owed money to the mobs. I believe Chris Benoit owed money to the mobs for his steroids or drug habits. I think the police was paid off by some higher power because we have to think back when Ellen DeGenerate Dancer killed himself last year. The police did an investigation on his wife. Let's just say if Chris Benoit did murder his family and himself, they did not do an investigation like what if somebody broke into his home. It sounds really fishy. Yeah, I mean, the investigation, there's definitely issues with it, regardless of what happened or if he's innocent or guilty. I mean, that's why you do real investigation, so you can definitively determine these things so that there aren't these open questions later. Tiffany posted all the interviews firsthand from those closest to him in the days just after the triple homicide, along with the newspaper clippings I still have, along with the fact that their narrative changed so drastically and so quickly just days after, are what will never ever convince me that Benoit did this. Too much evidence pointing to Kevin Sullivan. It would take a complete reinvestigation for me to ever change my mind on the official narrative Benoit was framed. Well, the official narrative could still be mostly bunk, and he could still be guilty if it all went down completely differently. But again, we'll never know that if there's not full investigation. Stephen Gallant posted, Chris Benoit and Jeffrey Dahmer have the same birthday. Is that true? That's kind of weird. Let's see if that's true. Chris Benoit, born May 21st. Dahmer, born May 21st. Wow. That's kind of weird, I guess. 1/365th chance of that happening. Ben Pat asked, wonder if Vince ever went to Little St. James. Did Vince run in the same circles? The thing about Vince McMahon, though, is this guy was a workaholic. I mean, he works all day, every day. So, I mean, apparently he doesn't take vacations, right? I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but apparently, like, his schedule was bonkers. I listened to a couple interviews talking about that, where he would work close to 20 hours a day. I mean, he would go to the WWE headquarters gym at 1 or 3 in the morning after working all day, then get up early, work all day. He's at every event. I mean, he's doing all. So just timeline alone, I mean, did he even have the opportunity to go? Did he have the time frame? Candy posted, he was physically abusive to Nancy before, and she was going to get a divorce, and her sister pressured her to give the marriage another chance. Warrior, football players have way more bumps than that, and they not doing all that. I mean, some football players, I mean, there's a lot of domestic violence situations, but yeah, I don't know about how many are actually killing their own kid. Purple Sky posted, my theory is that it had something to do with the 2007 steroid scandal. Congress was investigating the WWE, and after Benoit's death, the investigations just stopped. You can get over 400 pages of police docs by doing a document request with the Fayette County Sheriff's Department, and you can get forensic docs by requesting them from the GBI Crime Lab. Or you can check out my channel. Links are in the description box of my Benoit videos. Okay. So this is Purple Sky channel, Purple Sky 11 on YouTube. Quite a number of videos on Benoit. We could check those out, and I can go over them on the next episode. Dan the Man Can posted, I believe Chris Benoit, Nancy, and their son were murdered and Chris was set up. I believe the person who murdered them or had them murdered was Nancy's ex-husband, Kevin Sullivan, who other wrestlers said he threatened to kill Chris after Nancy divorced him to be with Chris. Kevin Sullivan is also allegedly a high-ranking member in the Church of Satan. Chava Guerrera said Chris and Nancy felt like someone was following or stalking them, so they started taking alternate route homes close to their death. So both of them said this to multiple people? Chavo, because people that are saying that Benoit was simply paranoid, was Nancy also corroborating that people were following and watching them? Chavo also said that when he was on the phone with Chris the night of his death, he heard a knock on Chris's door. Chris put the phone down to answer the door. He heard a scuffle occur through the phone before the phone call suddenly ended. Nancy's death was posted on Wiki about 14 hours before law enforcement or anyone else discovered the dead bodies, question mark. I believe Kevin Sullivan could have possibly had members in the Church of Satan to Chris and Satan prior to killing them because Kevin couldn't get over the fact that Nancy was having an affair with Chris and divorced him for Chris. In this video, Sullivan was the only one to try to slip in questionable things about Chris's character while trying to compliment him and saying he didn't have any bad blood with him at the same time. Others, at the very least, said Chris would never hurt his son. That case should be reopened. Lee Johnstone posted, I think Chris Benoit was selling prescription drugs such as steroids, testosterone, and painkillers. It would explain why Dave Taylor was seen outside the Benoit home over that fateful weekend, and why Chris Benoit opened bank accounts in his ex-wife's name and his sister's name and deposited hundreds of thousands of dollars into those bank accounts. Dr. Austin, Benoit's doctor, prescribed Chris Benoit a year's worth of steroids, testosterone, and painkillers every month for 9 months. That's 9 years worth of prescription drugs. Wow, if that's true, I mean, that's really mind shocking because would the WWE know about it? Like, if they were, I mean, I don't know, they were making a lot of money, right? Did they really need to have some of these side drug businesses? I mean, maybe. So if they knew about it and possibly were complicit in some way, they wanted to make it all go away. Okay, so who's ready for the biggest mind shock? Actually, one more. Let me go over one more comment before I get to the this testimony. The real Dustin Nunn posted one of the creepiest things about the Benoit family tragedy case. Who sent those text messages from Chris and Nancy Benoit's cell phones to Chavo Guerrero Jr. and Scott Armstrong's cell phones? How can you hang yourself with a weight machine? How is that possible? The knife under Daniel Benoit's bed, whose knife is it? Who does it belong to? How did it get under Daniel's bed? And the knife was never examined for fingerprints and blood by the Fayette County Police. The mysterious wiki entry talking about Chris, Nancy, and Daniel's deaths. Who wrote that article? Does CTE really cause athletes and professional wrestlers to commit murder? And last but not least, who killed Chris, Nancy, and Daniel? Who did it and why? The 2007 Benoit family tragedy case needs to be reopened. The cell phone activity is definitely huge question marks there. Wow, here's a comment from Speed Champ. Vince McMahon kicked off the PG era right after Benoit's death, and the whole wrestling world changed drastically. Just like how after Aaliyah died, Beyonce took over, and her Freemason husband Jay-Z. Be cautious. Every time someone wants to kick off a new era right after a controversial death. It's an interesting comment, Speed Champ. I don't know how much has been discussed in that direction. That is pretty weird. Huh. Yeah, I need to do a podcast on Aaliyah. Some major, major questions there. Home Truth's homie posted, I would much rather be a conspiracy theorist than a coincidence theorist. So many people who accept the mainstream official narrative as gospel truth are coincidence theorist NPCs, period. The truth often lays somewhere in the middle, and that is a good rule of thumb for me. That's actually a middle ground fallacy. But again, let's keep the fallacy in mind. That doesn't mean it's untrue just because it is a middle ground fallacy. Because the truth is, whatever it is, it might be on either extreme, or it might not. There were people who did not like Benoit, and we know that from his partner's ex, who were also wrestlers. Vince McMahon is a Freemason too, and the WWE reflect this in their logo, which is the 33 when turned 90 degrees. Out of memory, I think those exes were known Satanists, so I find it interesting that Benoit left Bibles next to his wife and child. This was a religious reference that could be related to the exes being Satanist and somehow involved. KS, I think the initials are, of one of the ex's ex-wrestlers and love rival to Benoit, Kevin Sullivan. Another thought I had is if Benoit, if they wanted to kill his wife and child in front of him to make him suffer, and he was free for whatever portion of time after, or maybe if they killed his wife and child, did he actually kill himself while not killing them? But either way, did he place the Bibles there because there was some kind of satanic occult activity? And he wanted to make sure their souls were clean or something to that effect. So was he the one who placed the Bibles if there was some kind of satanic occult activity prior involved in their deaths? PGO Gaming posted this theory, which I don't know if I've seen this one before. I do not trust Chavo Guerrero. I did initially, and I felt that he was an innocent bystander to two murders, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. The more I thought about it, the more I am convinced that Chavo was involved in both murders. He is the only man around both of them at the time and is alive. Whether he was involved or he simply knew, Chavo is not to be trusted. And another curious question, if they were tying up loose ends, so to speak, why are some of these other people still alive? Unless they really don't know anything. Warrior stated, I was just going to say that Chavo and Ray know something. Yeah, I mean, even if they're not involved, they might know something. Okay, so let's get to this major mind shock. The number one mind shock that we are here for. So this was posted recently by White Rider Graham Cracker. Wanna hear your story? In 2019, I was at a wedding in Atlanta for my cousin. His best man, his name was Stefan. Work at the gym that Chris Benoit went to just outside Atlanta for over 2 years. He told me they became pretty good friends. He was even at Chris's wedding. He showed me pictures. Anyway, long story short, he said for about 10 months before this happened that Chris was convinced Nancy was having an affair with his neighbor and multiple men that would frequent her home. He asked Stefan if he would drive by his house a few times a week while he was on the road. Buddy said he agreed, and no lie on my kids, told me that he drove for about 3 months off and on, and the last time about 3 weeks before the murder. On the last 2 times he drove by, he noticed a moving truck parked on the road in between the neighbors and the Benoits with Florida tags. He said the first time he seen it, he drove to the end of the street, which is a dead end. On passing by the truck again on his way out, he noticed someone getting out of the back of the moving truck, and it was Nancy and 3 men. He didn't have Benoit's new cell number, so he couldn't tell him the next day he drove by again after work, and the truck was still there, but parked a little further up the road, but now it had Atlanta plates on it. He said he wrote down the plate number and was going to give it to Chris next time he seen him at the gym. The week Chris got back, this guy had a bodybuilding contest, I forget where, but out of town. He never got to tell Chris. He said he notified the police as soon as he found out about the murders, and they took all the info and said they would be in contact. They never were. He called back about 30 days later, and they informed him that the case had been quickly closed. He said he knows without a doubt Nancy was in on the murders. She was going to kill Chris and the kid, but something went wrong. He said Chris's old neighbor had a restraining order on him for him asking her the question when she went to the gym. Funny thing is, she never went to that gym until Chris was dead. He thinks she made him when he was driving by the Benoit's house, and she found out who he was and wanted to see if he knew anything about the crime. He said the name on the moving truck was Tiger's Moving Corp. He said he has Googled that name for years, nothing ever comes up. I honestly believe his story. Okay, what does everybody make of this? I'm going to have to dissect this in 2 pieces because that was pretty mind-shocking. I mean, that might unravel the entire case. Yeah, I can't find a Tiger Moving Corporation. Is that like a fake company? I mean, maybe there's Tiger Movers or Tiger Moving. There's a whole bunch of those, but not with CORP that I can find. Okay, so let's dissect this. So, 2 different things. First of all, which neighbor is he talking about? Is he talking about Holly? Or is he talking about another neighbor? Because that's kind of important information. If he's talking about Holly, I mean, a lot of murders involve love triangles, cheating spouses, etc. So that could theoretically make sense if there was some of that involved. Or was, like, the moving truck, was Nancy planning on moving and taking Daniel with her? Because that would open up a can of worms. I don't think anybody would be happy about that, particularly Benoit. So, and regardless of whether she was or wasn't having some kind of an affair, or is there something far darker going on where these people associated with the moving company aren't a real moving company? And so they're there multiple times, including a few weeks before. But what about the day of? So again, the neighbor. So the neighbor does apparently have wild parties and a criminal record because of that. But is this the same neighbor that this guy's talking about? Now, separately, I don't know if I've seen the theory that Nancy was gonna wanted to kill Benoit. Oh man, that's tough. That's tough. Why would Nancy, if this is true that Nancy told other friends or family that they were indeed being followed, would she say that if she was planning to kill him and employing these shady people with fake moving companies to do so? Because that would bring more attention to people in the neighborhood. So, I don't know. That's a tough one to rectify unless that's not true. Also, is it realistic? I mean, if Stefan was this huge fan of Benoit, he's driving by the house a few times a week. That's kind of a lot just to do a favor for a friend who might be cheating with a neighbor. I mean, I don't know how close these guys were, unless he's just like the biggest Benoit fan and he's willing to do anything for Benoit. Why does Stefan? So, according to White Rider Graham Cracker, it says here Stefan knows without a doubt that Nancy was in on the murders and she was going to kill Chris and the kid, but something went wrong. How does he know that? I mean, you would need more information. He said Chris's old neighbor had a restraining order on him. Okay, so so a neighbor that no longer lived there? Is that what's going on here? I mean, this is, if White Rider Graham Cracker can respond again to clear these things up. Because, yeah, I mean, wow. But this would corroborate, like, if Benoit thought he was being followed, if there's some kind of fake moving company doing some kind of surveillance on the home, if it's one of these darker theories, I mean, was Benoit not simply aware and not paranoid, or both aware and paranoid and he really was being followed? Like, what's really going on? Warrior posted, "You never know, setting up Chris to get killed while in car with him. Typical Tupac Suge Knight type stuff." Shake my head. I mean, I don't know. Is it possible if there's more than one thing going on here? Like, if Nancy did want something, either to leave, to kill him, whatever, if she's also involved with Kevin Sullivan or cohorts of his, either knowingly or unknowingly, like if she's hiring people to do this, do they have other plans and they're also planning to kill her and she doesn't know about it? Was this some kind of weird crisscross criminal situation where everything went wrong? Iwo Gina posted, "I was never more shook by this testimony from this poster." R1, there is a Charles Manson episode coming. Yeah, Iwo Jima, that's why I did this whole episode, because when I saw that comment, because apparently what's rumored is that both Chris and Nancy had said they felt they were being followed. So, coupled with this information about a possibly fake moving company, this is creepy. I mean, I don't know if I would jumble in Nancy wants him dead. I don't know about that. I don't know where he got that information from. But if we disregard that for a second, if this additional testimony of fake moving companies and random men coming and going, that is really creepy. It's like a Men in Black situation or something. But again, even people that are paranoid or, like, not in this case, drug addicts, whatever, there's no magical Dungeons and Dragons spell that protects people from being harmed by bad actors. Like, he's this famous person. It's not impossible that there are people following him or keeping tabs. Even if it was just, let's say, a private investigator hired by Nancy to find out if he was cheating or whatever, there could have been somebody following Benoit. We obviously don't know if that's true, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that people were following Benoit. I mean, the WWE, especially if they're planning on making Benoit a champion or whatever, a lot of big companies much smaller than the WWE, they hire PIs to kind of keep track of some of their assets, so to speak, especially if they think they might be involved in shady dealings or whatever. So it's not an impossibility that people were actually following Benoit. So that's really what I wanted to go over for this episode. There's actually plenty more. I'll be doing another episode. So, yeah, what does everybody think so far to close this out? I mean, that was really creepy. It would be interesting to know if this guy would be willing to go on record and what other information he has. Because if this guy really was driving by the house multiple times per week, but he only saw the moving truck the last 2 times. And so apparently he said it was the same truck, but the second time it had different tags. That is pretty creepy. That's pretty creepy. And then the old neighbor with the restraining order. That seems to be an avenue of investigation that shouldn't be overlooked either. So that's it for this one. I mean, we'll be going over more coincidences and anomalies regarding other pro wrestlers as well, even more Kevin Sullivan situations. Yeah, this is a tough one. I really don't know how coincidence theorists write it off this quickly, because it's not like a full investigation was done. There were all these DNA tests, all the cell phone forensics were all added up perfectly. There was no funny business with the neighbor. I mean, this could, if this was a completely different situation, you could kind of say, okay, it appears to have happened as reported, but there's so many issues and problems here, so I don't know if people can actually say that. But again, thanks to all the Mindshock listeners listening. Hope everybody enjoyed another edition of the Mindshock podcast. Found it interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Make sure you're subscribed, like and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.